Hey there, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Evoke Greatness. This podcast was created for those of you who, like me, are driven by their curious nature and fascination with the champion mindset. If you have an insatiable hunger for growth and knowledge, or maybe you're just curious on how some of the most successful people have navigated their journey, we share the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, and all the lessons learned along the way. It doesn't matter what chapter you are on in your story. Maybe you're just getting started, or heck, maybe you're halfway through. What I know is where intention goes, energy flows. It's my most sincere hope that you will hear something in one or maybe many of these episodes that resonates with you and reminds you that you are not in this alone. As we venture into year 2, I hope that you find a sense of connection and community when you're here, because we all deserve a place where we belong. My name is Sunny, and I am so glad you're here. If you're new, there's a few things you want to know about me. I am a huge book nerd and a wee bit of a control enthusiast with an obsession for motivational coffee cups. I believe that a rising tide raises all ships, and I invite you along in this journey to evoke greatness. Welcome back to another episode of Evoke Greatness, where we dive deep into the journeys of leaders who have navigated the tumultuous seas of personal and professional development. Today, we're in for a treat as we're joined by Josiah Pledl, the founder of 45-Degree Leadership Consulting. With over 2 decades of visionary leadership under his belt, Josiah has honed a unique approach that seamlessly melds executive expertise with actionable insights, connecting the head to the heart in today's complex leadership landscape. Josiah's journey began in the wild world of public education, where he forged his path as a principal. Through his leadership, he achieved remarkable milestones, from spearheading unprecedented increases in parent and employee engagement to revitalizing attendance rates at a diverse high school. At the heart of his success lies a singular talent, and that is his ability to forge genuine connections, leveraging emotions to drive tangible results. In this challenging era where leadership stands at a crossroads, Josiah equips us with the ultimate solution: the power of human connection. Join us as we explore his insights, lessons, and the transformative potential of authentic leadership. Josiah, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sunny, and I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you and dive into all of your knowledge. We were chit-chatting for a while beforehand, and I think I'm going to even pull some of those stories into as we talk through your history and your experience in the world thus far from a leadership perspective. So I always like to, give people a little bit of an idea of who you are. So I gave a broad overview of what that looks like, but how did you come to kind of the place where you are today, training leaders, developing people, and doing this on your own outside of the school system, taking everything that you've learned, filled your tool belt with all the tools necessary? What does that look like for you today?
Yeah, so my journey has been unconventional as at best. And so I was a leader in education. I was a principal of a middle school in an urban area with close to 500 students. And it was during COVID, the pandemic, and in that time. And my next goal was to become a superintendent. And I have a 5-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter that mean the world to me. And my wife said, I don't know that I want our family to go through what the family of a superintendent of a school district goes through today, with the political pressures and social media attacks, and just the climate of public education is very similar to what people in healthcare, which is your background, have dealt with for the last few years. And so I'm a driven person that likes to chase goals and objectives and just get after it. And if there was really no upward trajectory or path for me, I started to question kind of why and what my future could look like. And I made the choice to walk away from a pension and job security and went to a company with about 700 employees across 41 states and launched their first ever leadership development training program. And that company, I started to realize, you can drive business results and protect the dignity and integrity of everybody involved. And if you balance the people part and the results part, it's really, really powerful. And this company had an 87% favorable employee engagement score. They had a 90% favorable manager effectiveness score. And in the 20-year history, they shattered the quarterly revenue records in the first quarter of last year. And so in looking at this, they poured into me, and I'm so grateful and blessed for the opportunity that they gave me access to some of the most powerful leadership development training in the world. But I started to create my own frameworks on how to execute emotional intelligence. And you hear the buzzword all the time, EQ this, EQ that. But I think we're at a point where people understand that it's important and people are craving how, right? And that's where I come in and train leaders on how to execute emotional intelligence in the leadership model that I built. And then most importantly, in the communication model, because that's where connection happens when we're engaged, when we're talking with others. And it's also the foundation of leadership. Leaders that are successful communicate well, and leaders that are not successful usually struggle. And it's usually in the how and the what of the vision, not the why, right? They can bark orders and tell you how to get there, but it's the buy-in, right? It's that connection that people are vested and want to drive results and want to perform. That comes from engagement, which comes from human connection. And so I launched 45 Degrees Leadership Consulting, which is my company. I'm a solopreneur doing this on my own, and it's been outstanding. I'm so grateful for my LinkedIn community. The platform's wonderful. The people there are amazing. I've learned marketing, sales, all the business sense from people on LinkedIn. And so here we are. We're rocking and rolling, coaching people on how to connect the head to the heart.
That's excellent. Well, you mentioned something and it pulled a thread. You and I are fellow outliers. And you know what? I think we probably both wholeheartedly believe, thank you, Scott McGregor, that outliers think differently. They show up differently, right? And you mentioned something that's really important to both of us. And so I love this, but I'm curious where it came from. You believe in a people over everything mentality. Where did that come from?
I mean, that goes way back to when I was a child, really. Is my parents, when I was a kid, were both social workers, and we lived in home with juvenile delinquents. Like, we had a foster home that was 24/7. It was our house, and we had 4 to 6 juvenile delinquents, in their teens that lived with us. And my parents coached them on how to develop job skills and find a part-time job and how to get to school and graduate high school. And in that environment, it was constant. Like, if you want to meet two of the greatest human beings in the entire planet, it's my mom and dad. And seeing how they poured into these kids, and sometimes, honestly, selfishly, I would say, like, they were busy, right? And so we had 5 juvenile delinquents. So that commanded a lot of their attention. And so for me, I got to watch, and I was blessed. Like, my parents loved me and cared about me and taught me. But I got to watch them interact in transforming lives. And that led me to connecting, with my friends in the neighborhood, because my parents were busy with 5 juvenile delinquents. And so if I wanted to play catch with a baseball, my dad may or may not have been able to, depending on what crisis he was like controlling at that moment. And so I'd have to find friends and I'd have to connect with friends. And then that led me to sports where, pickup games of baseball, you need 18 people, right? So you got to get these people together at a park at the same time. And you start to see people and believe that, like, we're all better off together. And so as a kid, I saw that. And then as I came up through college, I was involved as a manager with the UW-Milwaukee men's basketball program when we made it to the Sweet 16 with Bruce Pearl as the head coach. And we're the Cinderella story. And I watched Coach Pearl, who's now at Auburn, just an expert at connecting with human beings and engaging people, and that people matter more than everything. And then I studied abroad and spent time in England and spent 30 days backpacking through Europe, and really started to see that we're all the same, right? Like, we have the same desires. We have the same needs, whether you're in France or United States. Like, people are people. And as I got into education, I was dealing with people, in some of their worst moments of their lives, right? I've dealt with child abuse and sexual assault and homicide, right? And domestic violence. And so really, really, really sad and scary and rough moments, I would still see the amazing positive nature of humanity in these dark, dark times. And then getting into the business world where I was and seeing how you can lead from the CEO down to the frontline managers in a call center and embrace as people over everything and see the success in a corporate setting, in a school setting, in athletics. Like, if you want to be successful in the world, people over everything, just like Scott says, right? And that was when I first met with Scott, who, I will say this, Sonny, the Outlier Project is changing my life. And I have 2 master's degrees and all but a dissertation done in my PhD. And I've gotten more education from the Outlier Project since I joined in January than any of my formal trainings, right? And certifications or education. And I'm so grateful to be a part of it. But when you really, really see how Scott carries the community and Scott operates and everything that he does, and Kathy Love, they model it. And I was on a call with Kofi and I said, like, at what point is something going to happen, right? Like, this is way too positive. Like, everybody's way too supportive. Like, something is going to happen. And Kofi looked at me and said, it will not. And I asked him why. And he said, because everybody that's in there knows if you win, I win. And that's the community. And that's kind of aligns with just my experiences as a human being, going all the way back to, when I was 6 years old, is if you treat people the right way and commit to it, right? Like, it's not always perfect. I've done things that I'm not proud of and made mistakes, and there's road rash, right, from those instances. But at the core of who I am, people over everything means something like tremendous to me. And I've seen the results of how people are better and our world is better if everybody embraces that and then executes it. That's the big piece.
Yeah. Oh, you are bringing us to church this morning, man. Like, complete parallel. I've been a part of the Outlier Project for a little over 2 years, and same thing. Like, there are people there who will be lifelong friends, who see the world so similarly, yet with a unique twist that brings value to my life, to my experience, to the way that I view the world and show up in the world. And so I love that. Like, you couldn't have scripted a better answer. Like, and it was so from the heart. Your experience, no wonder you're doing what you're doing, right? All the things that you've seen and experienced, and you haven't just dealt with the good side of things. Like, you haven't dealt with the pretty side of leadership all the time. Like, you've gotten in the trenches and you've dealt with some stuff. And that, I think, adds a whole nother layer to wisdom and experience and expertise as you show up. And so I'm curious, almost weaving this back into leadership. Why is leadership at a crisis point, do you think, in today's world? We've gone through a lot over the course of the last couple of years with COVID, then coming out of that, the political stuff, the social unrest. I mean, there has been a lot in the course of a very short period of time. How do you think human connection offers that path forward?
Yeah. I mean, that we've been through a lot. Like, that might be the understatement of a century, right?
Right.
And I'm looking now just at the stuff that's going on college campuses. And if you look at those college kids and in their early 20s, like their formative years when they were young, the recession of '08, right? High school and college, COVID, and seeing what people have been through, it is a lot. And that's the people side, right? And with that, positional power is different than what it's ever been. I'm not that old, Sonny. I mean, I graduated high school in the '90s, and back then you did not disrespect a police officer, right? Like, when a police officer had a badge on and they were doing something wrong, you followed directions, did what they told you, and then called their supervisor after, but you never talked down to that officer, right? And look at how people treat law enforcement now, how I was treated as a principal, how doctors and physicians are treated in the medical field. And so positional power doesn't command the respect that it did. And so that's a challenge on leadership. And I started to see it with kids. I coached high school football. And when I was a kid, you'd have 30 kids, including me, saying, I want to play quarterback, right? And the coach would look at me and like, Josiah, look in the mirror, dude. Like, the Lord didn't bless you to play quarterback. Let's be real, right? And I could watch me throw. And now in youth sports, they don't have a quarterback. They don't have a point guard. They don't have a kid that wants to pitch in baseball because kids don't want the ball in their hands. They don't want to make the decisions. They don't want to lead. You see kids not getting their driver's license a gap year before college. Like, kids are avoiding the risk and responsibility of leadership. because it's uncomfortable, it's hard, and there's fear of failure, judgment. And most scary for some is the fear of success, right? And what could happen. And so you then combine that with what's going on in business with artificial intelligence and how fast that's happening, where, Netflix, it took 3 years to get to 1 million users. ChatGPT, it took 1 week. And so the change there is happening so fast. It's so volatile. It's so complex. It's so uncertain that leadership is in a crisis point of there's a new need for a new style of leadership. And that's where I'm here, is that it's the heart. And when you go back through the labor market, when we were a farming society, it was physical, it was the body, right? And then the Industrial Revolution, it shifts to the mind with assembly lines, and then the internet. And now we're combining like the human mind with artificial intelligence. And so the need now is the heart. And we've went from the body to the mind, and it's time for leadership in the labor force to focus on the heart. And that's what I equip leaders to do. And I show up every day because I am going to change the world. And I am here to help equip people to connect their head to the heart and meet the needs of this crisis, and to get people inspired to take that risk and responsibility and seek positive impact on others in our world, because it's time. And I got a 3 and a 5-year-old that I look at every day that inspire me to show up and do this.
Do you think the reason that just that younger generation doesn't want the responsibility of kind of the metaphorical ball in their hand, right? Like, do you think that's fear-based? Do you think it's being ill-equipped? I mean, in my head, I think about, how do we get not only the youth of today, but our top tier leaders and everybody in between? How do we get them to learn to do hard things better?
That is an incredible question. And so first off, for the younger generation, I don't think it's ill-equipped. I don't think, that's another thing I work with companies on, is the 4 generations in the workplace, and the difference between the boomers who are exiting, but then Gen X, which is me. And I'm on the line with Gen X, and like I'm a young Gen Xer, and then millennials, and now Gen Z. And Gen Z is incredible to me. They're driven by like mission and vision and contribution, right? They will walk away faster than any generation I've ever seen. Where I was talking with somebody yesterday about, when I was young looking for a job, all I cared about was the salary, right? Like, this is going to be really hard, but, this $11 an hour is a lot more than what I'm making now. I'm going to do it, right? And you did it. And I'm seeing with Gen Z of saying like, I don't want to work at that company. I don't personally align with the way they operate or their mission, and it's not for me. And you have this awareness of social issues and all of these pieces. And the thing I'm most excited about is I have watched social media destroy the mental health of adolescents for my last 5 years in education. It was brutal. Every incident that I investigated had a social media aspect. There's Snapchat involved. It started on Snapchat. It escalated on Snapchat. And I think that this younger generation, history is a pendulum, right? It swings back and forth. And we went so far into social media. And I honestly believe that this younger generation is going to take a stance and say, it wasn't cool the way that I grew up with that. And so let's step back from this, and let's get back to conversation and phone calls and face-to-face meetings, right? And like, let's get back to connection. And it has to happen, because right now, 1 out of 4 people in the world are experiencing loneliness. The United States Surgeon General has a task force to combat loneliness. And it is an issue. And so the ability to connect, an actual authentic connection, is needed now more than ever. And it's at a time where we joke about, and people say it, and I don't think it's true, that we're more connected than ever, right? Social media, phone in your pocket, instant access. But are we really connected, Sunny, or are we just visible?
I would say in my perspective, I would say we're probably the least connected. Honestly, at least from, again, I see the world in the way that I see the world. I think to your point, it's the visibility. So we feel like from behind a computer screen, behind a phone screen, we're connected because we see into other people's lives. I think we also see into the highlight reel of everybody's lives, making us feel less successful, worthy, like, oh, geez, so-and-so is doing so well. We fall into the trap of comparisonitis. And so I think through that actually disconnects us from people, from relationships. And so I would say, I would say we have a huge disconnectedness problem in the entire world.
Yeah. And I mean, the data is showing that, right? Like 1 out of 4 people in the world are experiencing loneliness. And that's not
Right.
okay. Like we are hardwired to connect and we need
Yep.
each other. And so I have all the faith in the world that the younger generation is going to flip that pendulum, and we're going to start getting back to that. And the dependency on Facebook and things that were so influential in my life coming up and are going to subside. And so the younger generation, I think that they've been through so much of the bad, right? Like with the recession, with the pandemic, and they've seen the challenges, I think, of leadership and how we're so quick to point fingers and attack, right? And the thing is I've sat in that chair, Sonny. Leadership is so hard.
Yeah.
And if you look at the pandemic and the choices that were made, and it's very easy right now to say, why did we do this? Why did we do that? Why didn't we do that? But in that moment, people were making decisions in ambiguity. Like with limited information, they were trying to do the best that they could. And that goes for the president, that goes for the doctors. Like, I'm not getting like political sides in this. I'm talking everybody, right? Like nobody knew exactly what was going on. And so they're trying to make decisions with the best that they could. And look what happened to those people, right? They got trashed. They got destroyed. And unless you've sat there and tried to make a decision, and they're doing it. I mean, Sonny, the governor of New York was like on TV like 24/7 during the start of that. He was nonstop on TV. And so, yeah, you're going to make mistakes, and we need to get back to a place where we come at it together and we move to collaboration rather than competition, and we seek to understand. And once that starts to happen and we chill out on the tax and the groups and all those things, and when that starts to happen and you can still be successful, right, in winning elections and things by being positive, I think that we start to see people wanting to come back into the world of leadership because it's not an attack thing. It's not an us versus them thing. It's a together thing. And honestly, Sonny, that's what our country is founded on, right? Like, how long can democracy go on if there's no room for compromise?
Right. Right. And to your point, you had talked earlier about connection, and part of connection is building trust. And I think, trust is one of those things that it is not being formed in a way in which it serves leaders and organizations, which then is the ripple down effect for anybody who is a part of the organization, being served by the organization. And so trust really is that cornerstone of effective leadership. How do you cultivate and foster trust within the people that you work with to then help their organizations? Like, how do we go about rebuilding that?
Yeah. So you can do all the research and you're going to find over and over, trust is the foundation of a high performing team. It has to be there. Right. And so I've created a leadership model that considers this, right? And so the leadership model I've created is 3 steps, and it's a little bit different than what it was traditionally, because traditionally competence got you promoted, right? You could execute tasks, you could deliver results, you could get the job done. And so competence still matters, but I touched on positional power and how it's different. It matters in a different way today than it ever has before. And so just through that lens, let's talk through this framework. And the first piece, the base, is connection. And in order to truly authentically connect, it has to be rooted in awareness. And that's an awareness of myself and an awareness of you. And so when I talk about awareness, it's your experiences, it's your needs, challenges, and objectives. Like, what is important to you? What are you bringing with you into this interaction, into this relationship? Because the old idea that you leave your home life at the time clock when you punch in, like, that was so unhealthy and so untrue and so wrong. Like, we take our whole selves with us wherever we go. I'm not perfect. I've brought my work home and it wasn't good. I've also brought my home to work and it wasn't good, but I'm a person and that's going to happen and that's real. And so when you start to appreciate this connection and this who you are, then you start to understand. And from there, you have to commit time. So visibility and accessibility, and you start to build on this connection and interact, and it starts to form chemistry, which is where I know what Sunny's going to say before she says it. I know what Sunny's going to do before she does it because I am aware of her. I know what's important to her, and I've spent the time to understand it. And so you go from connection to chemistry, and then is competence. And so this is built around the idea of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you build connection and chemistry and then get the competence, they know you care. And now they're in a position to listen and to hear what you know. And that is the model that I teach leaders to be rooted in. And here's the kicker. So that's connection, chemistry, and competence. I've also created an equation on how you build trust. And it is, listen to this. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Connection plus chemistry plus competence. And so think about the person that you absolutely trust in this world and just think about that person and reflect. Are you connected? Are you aware of them? Are they aware of you? Have you spent time with them to build chemistry? And can they deliver on what you need them to deliver? Are they competent? And I guarantee all of those are a very resounding yes. And that is what led to you to trust them in the first place. Mm-hmm. And so in this leadership model, you are equipped with a way in every human interaction to lead in a way that builds and facilitates trust, because we know it's the number one foundation of successful teams.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone, pull your car over on the side of the road, stop what you're doing, go back about a minute and a half to what Josiah just walked through. You want a masterclass in leadership? You want a masterclass in the literal steps and things that you need to do, the traits you need to possess, the way in which you need to show up? Boom, you just got it. Ooh, y'all, I am doing something that I don't normally do. I am stopping this episode in its tracks, but there's a really good reason behind it. In the spirit of asking for feedback from listeners, what I'm hearing is we'd love to have the episodes a little bit shorter. Can we consume them on our drive in or dropping the kids off or on a walk? Absolutely. I hear you and I am paying attention. So this episode, I am actually cutting in half. I know Josiah probably has you leaned so far in and listening and taking notes because his story is amazing. He's a phenomenal human. I know you're also going to want to make sure that you tune in next week for part 2. So make sure you subscribe. You'll get notified immediately upon the new episode dropping. So make sure to come back and listen to part 2 because this man is like bringing us to church. Thank you so much for listening and for being here on this journey with me. I hope you'll stick around. If you liked this episode, it would mean the world for me if you would rate and review the podcast or share it with someone you know may need to hear this message. I love to hear from you all and want you to know that you can leave me a voicemail directly. If you go to my website, evokegreatness.com, and go to the Contact Me tab, you'll just hit the big old orange button and record your message. I love the feedback and comments that I've been getting, so please keep them coming. I'll leave you with the wise words of author Robin Sharma. Greatness comes by doing a few small and smart things each and every day. It comes from taking little steps consistently. It comes from making a few small chips against everything in your professional and personal life that is ordinary, so that a day eventually arrives when all that's left is the extraordinary.